And then the reality hits that actually you can never take that sort of decision. Nothing's ever guaranteed. And 2 weeks later, after I did my knee, I was never the same player again. I never had that opportunity again to go to that sort of level. So it's one of my biggest regrets. I'll tell you something that really resonated with me was I remember watching back some of the clips, and this sums up football, I think, is there was a batch of people that really were worried about me. Players-wise, I'm talking now as well. And there was 1 or 2 players that just went to the manager to talk tactics, whatever. And I'm glad I did when I time, because I didn't expect to retire at 27. I thought I was going to make it to 30, 32, whatever. But it genuinely did save me. Knee after 2 or 3 suddenly. If I was training, I literally was limping around the pitch, could barely turn. If I kicked the ball with my left foot, it was like a knife was going in it. I can't believe I was still playing on it. If you carry on, you won't be walking in your 30s. But I think it's also about expectations. So there's no problem buying a property today for you, because it's still a long-term plan. If you still got, property is a long-term game at the end of the day. If you're in it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you've just got to think, well, yeah, you're not going to be a millionaire next year by doing this, but in 10 years' time, I guarantee you're going to be in a really good place. If you follow these solid rules and manage it well and buy in areas of great fundamentals, just the nature of inflation, the nature of money printing, if you use your money wisely, use leverage wisely, you could be in an amazing position. Ideally, like the way I did it on a small scale, was having assets that give you time and freedom to think, where's my next step going to be? And it might be starting a business. It might be that you retrain yourself in something else. Or it might be that you want to take a year's sabbatical to be with your family, whatever, before you think. But you need something to give you that, what's going to pay your bills at that point. Because when you're 30, 32, 35, whatever, you're going to have bills at that point. Have you budgeted towards that? So it's like, you just got to go out there and start. And as you said, as long as it doesn't affect your footy side of things, you can get passionate about other stuff, work on it in the background, and quietly see if you can build stuff up.
So Chris, firstly, thanks for coming. We always appreciate your time coming down. So thanks for that. I want to start off Bristol City. Started there at a young age. Want to know a little bit about that and your time there, really.
Yeah, so Bristol was my first club. I was born in Swansea, and my family moved across to Gloucestershire when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. So Bristol City was the biggest team in Gloucestershire to go to, so I was fortunate enough to go there. So I was there from about 9 years old, and I think I left when I was 22. So I was there for a good stint, and I came through the academy like we all do. So at the time then, I don't know if you remember, it was Centre of Excellence or Academy, so that was a level. So Bristol City was an academy, so we would play Arsenal, Chelsea, whatever, but we were probably the smallest academy, so we were like a Championship / League One club at the time, but we had the opportunity to play against the big guys. So that's where I came through all those years, and I was fortunate enough, to get, when I was about 15, 16, I was sort of opportunities to go elsewhere, really, and that's when I started to think, well, actually, I think I can really have a good career in this. And I thought I'd stay home, because I had it quite easy. I was living at home, family, I'd travel to the games, parents looked after me amazingly. And that's why I signed at 16, sort of at the time, I'm not sure what the rules are now, you couldn't sign a pro contract until you were 17 years old. So to stay at Bristol, they offered me, I think it was my birthday's in December, so it was 6-month YTS, straight into like 4-year pro contract. So I signed up there, and that's where the whole journey started.
I seen that you turned down Everton.
Yeah, I know. If we go through regrets, that might be the biggest regret.
Didn't fancy coming to Liverpool, no?
I don't know if I had the chance to go to Liverpool, but I think the Everton one came from, obviously, I was playing for Wales and things above age group, but that year we played Everton in the Youth Cup, and we beat them, and we went on a little run in Bristol City, and so I think that's what it really came from there. They were watching. And it's typical of my story. So I turned them down, and 2 weeks later I made my debut for Bristol City and blew my knee out.
How did you make that decision to turn down, obviously, a bigger club at the time at such a young age?
I'm sure do you know, genuinely what it was you feel invincible at that age. I'd never ever had an injury. Every stage that I had, every sort of a hurdle that I came up against, I just took it on. If I had to play a year up, I'd play it. If I was playing sort of international level with the youth teams for Wales or wherever, I could do it. I was fortunate enough that my game was very about athleticism and speed and agility, and I was super, super quick and quite strong. So I just it just worked for me. And then when the Everton thing came up, I thought, well, I don't need to go now. I'm quite happy. I'm 17, 18. I was living at home. I think at Bristol I was going to get my chance, and we were Championship at the time. I thought, they'll come back in a couple of years, whatever. I'll just sign on. And then the reality hits that actually you can never take that sort of decision. Nothing's ever guaranteed. And 2 weeks later, after I did my knee, I was never the same player again. and never had that opportunity again to go to that sort of level. So it's one of my biggest regrets, but I never did anything for money. I've never made a decision in my life for money. So I genuinely wanted to play really well and be a player that came through at Bristol City. They invested a lot of time and effort into me. I wanted to give back to that. But looking back on it, you know, from a selfish point of view, I never had the opportunity again. And what if, you know, that's one of those questions.
I think that's the thing with football, isn't it? There's so many what ifs, but ultimately you never know. You could have gone to Everton and your path could have been positive or negative. You don't know which way you'd have gone there.
Absolutely.
But you've made that decision fully believing in yourself, staying at Bristol, obviously, like you said, showing respect for the faith they're putting you. So was there no one in your ear at that time, parents, friends, family, agents, probably mainly saying, look, we have to go, we have to get that deal done?
There was some advice to go. There is some words, you know, if I was to speak to myself again, I would say you should go because you can never, like for me, you can never ever say that it's going to come around again. You can't guarantee that. So I should have gone in hindsight for just that opportunity. It's such a small window that it comes and goes. But money wise, yes, people said, you know, about the monies, there was more monies that were, you know, were offered and things. But for myself, that was never a decision. I never did anything for money in all my careers. I'm not saying I ever earned huge monies, but even when there was decisions made on monies, it was more, where do I feel most comfortable? Where do I enjoy? A lot of the time was I tried to repay faith for people that looked after me. And that was a big thing for me in my career, because some people definitely didn't look after me in my career. And then a handful did. And I tried my best to repay them for what my body allowed until I was forced to retire. So yeah, it was more, I felt I owed something to Bristol City, and I still felt that there was a path there for me. I still wanted to be a Premiership player and have a brilliant career, and I felt that path was already there, so I was happy to stay. But then, you know, football happens, doesn't it?
Do you know what's hard? Like, you hear a lot nowadays, people who, probably young lads, similar situation to what you were in, who were doing well at their respective teams, and clubs are jumping at the chance to sign them, and you're hearing from the media and stuff, look, you know, you need to stay, play 20, 30, 40 games, your move will come. That's good advice, but then also you never know what is around the corner, and that same player could get an injury as you did, and then at the end of that season get released, not be the same player, and has turned down a move to Manchester United, Man City, one of the big boys. So you never know when the time is right to make that move. And none of us want to live with regrets. And you're saying that there. You've never done anything for money, but you just don't know in football. You just really don't know what the right decision is.
Absolutely.
And especially as a 15, 16-year-old lad as well.
Yeah.
That's where you are relying on, like, people to help you out and make that decision for you. You want someone really to take that decision out of your hands in a way, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think, so the first lot, I'm sure for you guys, well, you know, when the first opportunity to move away was 15, 16, and I was like, oh no, I'm quite comfy getting the contract. And then that Everton one was when I was 17, 18, but I was still living at home. You know, I was sort of training with the first team, but I go back home and live with parents. I had a cushy life. It was easy. And I just thought, oh, it's inevitable. I'll just play 30, 40, 50 games, championship, and then I'll have my opportunity from there. It's until, I think, with football and in life, Joe, until you have that real shock to the system, that real negative, then it brings you back down to earth that actually nothing's guaranteed. You're going to have to work so hard to get these opportunities again. Look, some people get lucky and they never have those until they're 28, 30, 32, and they've already had their career. That's kind of the thing I was always a bit bitter about, was I did my knee on my debut. So very few people saw me when I was at my true best, when I was playing above my level. And up to sort of 18, I was really, really good. And then after that, I was, you know, my knee was never the same. So my career sort of dwindled as my knee deteriorated with it. So, but that's normal. There's loads of players of the same story. You know, it's not, I'm not special for that kind. It's just reality of football. Talk
us through that debut then. Obviously the anticlimax of being so excited to make your debut, to then getting an injury that put you out for around 11 months.
Well, it's an interesting bit. So my dad used to come to every single game I ever played. Every game I played for Wales. He travelled all around Europe to see me play. And he was actually in America on work, so he missed it. And my mum came to the game. Bear in mind, finds it quite nervous. She'd never come to the game. So when I did my knee, so I was on oxygen and everything. I saw everything silent in the crowd, because that was my debut for being a local player. So it was quite a big thing at the time. I remember being on oxygen. And I looked up, and my mum was on the pitch on top. She actually came out of the stand, came down to the steward, said, "That's my boy." Came onto the pitch. She's in front of 15, 20,000 people, you know. So I looked at her, I was like, this is strong. And then, my mum was also walked off there. So I don't think she could ever handle watching a game again. But do you know what? When I think back to it, it just happened in such a flash. But I tell you something that really resonated with me was, I remember watching back some of the clips, and this sums up football, I think, is there was a batch of people that really were worried about me. Players-wise, I'm talking now as well. And there was 1 or 2 players that just went to the manager to talk tactics, whatever. And I'll never forget, and I know who those people were, and I'll never forget, but that summed it up. There was a couple of people that really cared, as in you could see that was a serious thing, something that just happened. But then a couple, day job, not interested, the fact that happened. So that's...
I've got a few people like that.
I'm the exact same. Like the first time I got my first serious injury, which was my knee, I still remember to this day the people who messaged me after the game, who would check in on me a week later, and them people weren't the people you would expect. They were managers and colleagues from 4 or 5 years previous, just seeing it on the news, seeing it on your social media. How are you? Just checking in. You think, wow, like that means so much. And then people still to this day are the people that you think, you know what, I will always give a good reference to because they're top guys. Like I won't call them friends. Like I've got people in my head now who I'm thinking of that I probably haven't seen for years, but I know that they care about me and they would be the first ones to drop everything to check in on me. And like you said there, football is very much like that. Yeah,
well, it's dog eat dog, which is understandable to a degree, but you're still humans with it, and I think to be that callous in sinner. So that's just something that I bring that up because that's sort of a good life lesson.
Do you hold a grudge?
To an extent, I think. To an extent, and I'm not a nasty person, but it's just the way I live my life. I've had so many negative experiences with people that I just cut that out of my life. So, well, I've experienced it. It's hurt me for it, but then you get resilient. The one good thing of having so many negatives is you've almost accelerated 40 years of pain into a 10-year window. Now it's like, it take a lot to really bowl you 100%. Over now. How many jobs do you have someone screaming in your face, expletives, how bad you're, not just at your job, but you are bad as a person from this close. So now nothing's scary anymore,
How did you find in the 11 months out? Did you think that you're going to come back from them 11 months out and then be the player you was, or did you start having worries?
I knew my skill was I was very, very quick, very agile. I was a defender, so I had that skill set of being a Premiership player, but I was a pretty simple player. My skill set was basic, really, but I was such a good athlete. That's what I think teams could see in me. So I knew when you'd had an injury like that, it's like that could be a real problem for my career, which it proved to be. But back then, that was 2008. That's a long time ago.
What did you do?
So I did my ACL, but it was the cartilage I really badly damaged, and that was what retired me in the end because I blew out so much of the cartilage with it. But back then the rehab was terrible. So my knee, I still can't fully straighten my left knee. So I came back. So nowadays, the same injury, players come back and they're the same. Yeah. As mine, I was significantly worse for it. And I remember at the time the physio would give me a sheet of paper, go in the gym and do this. I wouldn't see him for 5 days. That's just I came through the sort of the end of the old school era. That's what it was like. Even though that was a championship club, we didn't have amazing facilities. It was okay, but it was kind of like, try your best and get back from it. And throughout the whole rehab, I knew I wasn't right because I couldn't jump off it the same. I couldn't twist and turn. And I remember there was not many times I remember being this upset, but I remember crying after a training session, coming back from injury. So I was probably about 6 months into rehab and doing 1v1s with players. And that used to be my one. I was brilliant at 1v1, such a good 1v1 defender. I remember playing against a lad who I think he was my age or a year younger actually. And I remember playing and he was running past me. I couldn't twist and turn anymore. And I remember just thinking there and then, it's like, oh shit. I'm not what I used to be. And I remember going, that was like, that to me, I'll always remember that moment of, that was a real awakening of you aren't the same anymore. And that always sits with me. I think you have them moments, don't you?
Where, like, I've certainly had a few where you think, oh, I used to be able to do that. I could do this a lot better. Now I suddenly can't do it anymore. But it usually comes at the end of your career. Whereas you're saying there, it's come right at the very beginning when most people, it's another 20 years down the line for that to happen. Yeah. And I think the rehab in the sense of that injury, like you said, has progressed massively to this day. I think back then it was a little bit unknown in terms of you do your ACL, especially your cartilage, along with it. Yeah. It's like you might struggle to get back, which proved to be the case. But from you then at that age to have that so early on to then go and play for Wales, like how many years after was that?
So I played for Wales when I was 20. So when I came back from my knee, I did have a bit of a spell where I started playing for Bristol. It took me a while. I came back and I played about 6 months, sort of coming to the reserves, being involved with the first tour, but not really playing, just training and playing. Then I went on loan. So I was playing sort of under 21s for Wales, but I went on loan to Stockport, ironically. So they were in League One just as they started to sort of decline. I went to them in Colchester and had a handful of games over there. And it was when Gary Johnson then got sacked at Bristol City. And Gary Johnson was a really hard manager, but he generally played a lot of the experienced players. So for the younger players, we didn't really get in a chance. Yeah. So he moved on and the assistant manager came in. And our first game was Newcastle at home. Remember the Newcastle team in the Championship was Andy Carroll, Kevin Nolan. You know, they had like Gutierrez and Enrique. They had like one of the best Championship teams ever. And it was at home on Sky. And that was my debut. So I came back from loan and played in that, Mark and Andy Carroll. So that was like an amazing high. And I played some games there and it went pretty well again. And from that, I went off and played for Wales first team, but it was a friendly against Croatia at the end of the season. So I went with the under-21s, then went with the first team. But this sums up my career that I went and played for the 21s against Austria, I think it was, and I had a really bad back at times. So I was always nursing something. My whole career was nursing something. I had a really bad back to the point where I now couldn't even tie my shoelaces and stuff. My back was so bad, I didn't know what was going on. But I said, I'm playing for Wales. Like, this is my dream to make it into, no matter what, I'm playing this game. So I'd go to the physio and say, oh, my back's a bit bad, you know, can you rub it? It's not making any difference. I've taken way too many painkillers just to get through. So the game comes and I'm on the bench and there's a handful of us on the bench with the first team lads that are usually there. And Modric, I was coming on to Mark Modric things, and I remember I couldn't even do my bootlaces up. I was having to pick my knee up onto the side and like somehow, like almost with straight arms, do my shoelaces up. I don't know how I was playing. And I took some deep heat, a tube of deep heat, put it in my pocket, and I was rubbing deep heat on every 10 minutes. So just to literally numb my back. And I came on for like 15 minutes at the end, so I did it. And I think I tackled Modric once before he got subbed. So that's like my claim to fame after. So I did that. And I came back to Bristol City, I had a scan, I had a disc bulge in my back. I didn't play for 6 months after that. I bet that was one of the worst injuries ever. I don't know if you've ever had back injuries, but that was a bad one because you can't avoid the back pain stuff. You can't sleep, you know, every time breathing. So I had to like sit rigid for ages. And then I was about 6 months again with that. Came back after that, tore both my hamstring. And that was sort of like the end of my Bristol career. I couldn't get fit after that. I just had all these major ones. I think I've torn pretty much every muscle in my leg, both hamstrings, both groins, both calves. And it was just like, you know, one thing after another. But it all came from, because my knee couldn't straighten, it changes the way you walk, changes the way you run. Then, you know, certain muscles were tighter than others. Your back, your hips change, and then pressure on certain joints are different. And when you start putting that load through, that where a body that's not working properly, it's not biomechanically the same, eventually it cracks, you know, and that's what started to happen to me.
So was there ever a point on this journey where you're thinking about the future? You're thinking, you know what, this just isn't going to work. Like, I've not got long left. I'm going to have to start studying. I'm going to have to get in touch with the PFA and do one of their courses. I'm going to have to start saving and being like financially wise with my money. Like, was there a particular point in time where you thought, right, this is the end of me? I'm going to be, obviously before retirement, was there a stage along the way where you thought about it?
I said before, that's one of the blessings of being injured that early, was I was thinking it from the start. Because I was like, I'm not be playing until I'm 35. This is how bad it feels at 20. You know, I was on painkillers from 20 years old to get through, and I'd have to ice my knee every day to train the next day. And I would literally have to live around my knee to like, I'd have to stretch to this, to that, and then I'd just get through the next session. I couldn't practice extra because something else would go. So I just managed it. And because I was so diligent on it, I played till I was 27. If I hadn't, I'd been retired by 23, 24, I'm sure. But that made me think then, well, you've got to be thinking ahead. And I was fortunate enough, weirdly, my career was sort of inverted, where my biggest contract, my biggest wages when I was 21, 22. You know, that's sort of the end of the championship wages. And then my career then went into more League One and League Two, and that's where I leveled off. So I was fortunate enough to buy a property at 19 in the centre of Bristol, and then another one a year later, things that I still own today. But I was already thinking at the time, not really with any real brains of, or I'm thinking of exact percentages and all of this stuff. I was just thinking pension pots time, 19, 20, I can afford to buy this in a great area. That's going to be great for me in 10, 15 years. And I was just chipping away at it that way. But then, like for most players, I think as your wages come down, you don't have the same buying power when you're in League One, League Two. So you have to really cherry pick what you can invest in. So it comes down to more your time. And I started, for me, the one thing that made me money was property. So I was like, well, I'm going to start learning a little bit more about that. And that became a little side hustle, you could call it, a passion project for me on the side. And that's what I was quietly doing, was acquiring what I could whilst I was still playing. And I'm glad I did when I time, because I didn't expect to retire at 27. I thought I was going to make it to 30, 32, whatever. But it generally did save me, because those chunks of equity that I had in those properties and that rental income per month and that stuff that it built up alongside some savings, it made a massive difference to when I was told that is it. It gave me that buffer to start a new business and everything else. If I didn't have that, you'd have to go and find the next job like that to go cover. And I didn't have dependents. If you have dependents, even more pressure.
So where did that come from? Because I'm just thinking of a lot of young lads, probably myself included, and I've always thought that I've been pretty switched on in terms of what's coming next and being quite conscious of the future. But I'd say a lot of lads won't think the way you've thought there. Does that come from families? That come from agents? Did you have advisors? Because to make them decisions, even with the injuries that you've had, to think, you know what, I'm going to buy this property, it might go into my pension. That is pretty switched on for what a lot of people will be like.
I think it's first of all, it's family. I grew up in the country, so when my family are from humble beginnings. They come from Swansea, didn't come from much, and their big thing moving over to Gloucestershire was that was a big thing, to leave Swansea to go to there. And I was fortunate enough to have good schooling and looked after from there. So all my contracts, it was all built in from your parents all the time. That if I never really spent much anyway, but they would look after, say, well, you should be buying something. Why have you not bought something? I was pressurized to be thinking that way. And I think
you probably hated them at the time.
Yeah, well, to a degree, but I'm not a materialistic person, so that was easy for me. I've never been into materialistic things, so that was quite an easy thing. I think it's different if you're upbringing. Bear in mind, I was from the countryside, really. So when I moved to Bristol City, into city, that was a massive culture change to me. I remember being 16, 17, coming in, and my mum used to buy my clothes when I was 15, 16. So it turned out, and I don't know what these makes. What's Ralph Lauren? Never heard of it. What's Nando? Never been to a Nando before. It's just, I lived out in Gloucester, and back then the world was smaller. It sounds daft, but it was. You just wouldn't do these things. So that to me wasn't a problem, really. My money wasn't gone on all these expensive things. But then I saw a lot of people that did, and a lot of people now that suffer from that. And a lot of that is guidance in it. But also, you have to take a bit of certain responsibility in yourself, that you got no one else will look after you other than yourself, really. And there's financial advisors out there. Some are good, some are awful, and some I have a big question mark against most of them. But it's down to you as well. Eventually, you have to take responsibility for yourself, and the earlier you do it, the better. But it often takes something negative. It takes something to shock you to do it. My shock came at 18. So that's good and bad, isn't it?
It is
Most
good,
people
but
don't happen until they're 30.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. You had the wise head on your shoulders as such an 18, young lad, because you were saying you had to go in after training every day. You was icing, you couldn't even do extras and stuff like that. That's actually quite sad to hear. An 18-year-old lad having to do that, because that's usually more for an older player like us now, probably.
Yeah.
But an 18-year-old lad having to do that. So you had your head screwed on back then, but them worries for you there has helped you out in the future. But for the young lads now going forward, it shouldn't have to take that big shock to get injured. While they're earning this money at a young age, to start trying to do something with it now, learn something new, to invest into something. What that is, we don't know. But
we said this last week, didn't we? We said exactly your words there. It shouldn't have to take a shocking moment to realise what could be coming next. The whole message that we want to get out there is, don't let it be that shocking message that spurs you to do something, be proactive. And I think that is exactly what a lot of people are thinking, isn't it? Waiting until the injury comes, or I don't know, something else happens that makes them think, shit, I need to do this now. Well, you need to be sooner than that.
So I retired in November of my contract, so I had 6 months left. So I think contractually, depending on what your contract, the club is meant to pay 12 months your contract. So typically in my fashion, I was actually just about to agree a 2-year contract on more wages, and that was at Oxford at the time, League One. And so if I'd have signed that contract, I'd have had, instead of 6 months of the lower wage, I'd have had 12 months on a larger wage. But after that, that is it. That's all the contract. These clubs. So if you sign a 4-year contract, they don't need to pay you 4 years if you go down injured. And I think I was fortunate. I think that I had an injury where I was able to keep going. I feel sorry for the guys when they have that leg break and that is it.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So if you sign a 4-year deal and you have to retire,
you're not owed that.
They don't pay you 4 years.
No, you get 12 months. You do.
But what happens if you just say, I'm not retarded. You can get your 4 years.
Well, I think they
Who decides whether you're
go
retarded?
down the legal
It's
route
out of our
of-
jurisdiction, this, John.
Yeah, but I imagine
Lads, say you're not retarded, get paid.
Cling
that's
on.
it. I think you'd have that question of they'd bring in the surgeons, they'd bring in
And
all
the lawyers.
They'd bring in the lawyers to say, look, you can't physically represent this club anymore. We're paying you X amount, and you can't do your job. You're due 12 months. Sorry, mate, but it is what
Unless
it is.
you get a decent club, as we spoke about with a guest last week.
Yeah,
but
it'd
it's
be
up
nice,
to
yeah.
the
Who
clubs can
continue
do
to
it.
pay.
Of course they can keep doing it. But I'm telling you, Oxford were brilliant with me. But that's what they were meant. They could have fought and said we're not going to pay, and then it goes down a legal route side. But they were really good, and they paid me the 6 months. But they're not due to give me another 6 months into free. So they did what they were meant to do, and I'm very, very grateful for them for it. But that was it then. I had 6 months and then zero. That was footy gone at 27. So, well, 28 then by the time that had finished.
Talk about that day then. So I'm trying to get my head around you being told, age 27, that day, you're retiring, you're done. How is the day after in terms of, I know you're saying that you're getting 6 months money, so that takes care of it for a little bit. But what is how are you paying the bills? In your head, what are you thinking, right, how am I paying for this? How am I paying for this? Where's my career going next?
Well, I think that almost comes secondary. Like for my position was, I'd in the second year at Oxford. I mean, typical my fashion. The first year, the day before the season started, I blocked a shot in training and broke my ankle, literally burst my ankle. So I had to get all that reconstructed. So I barely played in the first year. Played literally at the end of the season. So second year was right, come back, try and cement myself. So I was playing the games, and I was playing every game. And then I remember in training, I was meant to be starting the next day, and I was literally just training as normal. And suddenly my knee just went almost like numb. Then this sort of like white hot pain in it. I thought, what the hell is that? I've had all sorts of pain in all different kinds. Like, what is that? I remember just saying, look, let me just walk off now. I've got a game tomorrow. Let me rest it up. And I went to see the physio. It looked all right. And but there's no swelling, which is weird for my knee. And he's just, go rest up. You're playing tomorrow. So, okay. And when I went home, I couldn't go up the stairs. My knee literally felt like it was grinding. It was awful. I've had lots of knee pain, but this was different. So I'm starting next day. So I go to bed, I'm icing it, trying to have a hot bath it after, try and loosen it, all this stuff. So I turn up to the game, and it's like, turn up early. Like they say, if you've got a knot, come in. If you've got a niggle, come in early. We'll get it rubbed on it. So
Come in early.
I'll come in early. So I come in early. So I sort of move it around. It's not swollen. So all right, okay. So I'm getting sort of loosening up, and like meant to be starting. I said, I don't think I can start on this. So like they said, go do the warm up. So I was like, okay. So I put my kit on. So I'm in and our warm up was we go side to side on the pitch. I mean, I was like an oil tank. I could not turn. So I was jogging, and it was hurting jogging straight. And to turn, I'd have to do a whole lap around there to turn, because I could not turn. I was like, there's no way I can play. So I had to call it off then. But what I didn't have a scan that day, which was a stinker really, because I often went and had a couple of, I don't know if you remember, like Durolane injections, which are like lubricating, stuff like that. So masks problems basically. So I had a few of those. I was out for a couple of weeks, and it just so happened, it's not really my fault. At the time, we went on a bit of a losing run, and we were like a playoff team at the time. So there's a bit of pressure of, when's he back fit to come and play? So I came back in and played, and my knee was okay. It definitely wasn't what it was before I did that, but I could play on it. I came back and played 4 or 5 games, and we did start to win some games, but then my knee, after 2 or 3 suddenly, if I was training, I literally was limping around the pitch, could barely turn. If I kicked the ball with my left foot, it was like a knife was going in it. I can't believe I was still playing on it. But I finally, I remember it was another Friday before a game. I'm due to start. I'm in training, and the manager would come up and say, how are you feeling today? How's your knee? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It'll be okay. I remember then training, and I literally, it's so obvious I couldn't move. He's like, look, you've got to go in and see the physio. So I went off to a scan, and at the time the radiologist was friends with Oxford, so they would scan, and within 10 minutes you'd have a result, which is not normal. So I remember having a phone call from the physio, and they were like, that radiologist just called me, and your knee is like a scroll of issues with your knee. Basically, it's like you've got a 60-year-old knee. So you've got all your cartilage is worn out there. On your lateral side, you've got no cartilage left. But then from that, I had like IT band syndrome. I had all these tendon issues. I just because of one thing, the knee was wrecked. And it literally the wording was, you need to stop, basically. If you carry on, you won't be walking in your 30s. And you could try and not train every and play 10 games a year, 20 games a year, but when you hear that, why would you do it? And it was a relief, because I knew it was seriously wrong. I was playing through it with the painkillers I was on was ridiculous, but you kind of know nothing else. You know,
I've said this before. No one knows your body like yourself. So no matter what anyone else says to you, you played with pain. Yeah. You've said you've played with pain the whole time, but when you got this pain, you knew it was just different because we go through different pain every single day with injuries, lads. But when you get something different, only you know exactly how that feels. Yeah,
for sure. And you know that it's one of the, as I said, the experience of that at the time. I was thinking, I knew something was serious then. I didn't quite know it was going to retire me at that point, but I had my suspicions something was seriously wrong. But then for me, I didn't get any insurance payout for my injury, so that's kind of the reality as well. People think, oh well, I'll get X amount for this. Well, mine was deemed as wear and tear, which in fairness it was, but then I kind of had like a secondary issue on top of an old issue. But if you think of as a footballer, your whole body's wear and tear.
Of course it is,
what's not wear and tear? If you go and have a really bad hamstring injury, you've worn a toy, you've been playing on it for 20 years. If it was brand new hamstring, it'd be fine. So, that sort of thing as well is a real reality. Because I remember at the time, I knew someone else who retired, and his surgeon was a little bit more lenient with this report, shall we say, and he got paid out. And he was on way more money than I was on, and I really needed that money. Would have been like a year's wage for me, because it's all tax free. But didn't have anything. So that's another shock to the system. But part of the thing I go on when I speak to friends, people don't realize the other stuff that comes with that. So at the time, for me, I was told to retire. I won't be walking again. I went back home, and I was with a partner, long-term partner at the time. And we split up at the time then. So I had a fiance and we were together for 10 years and we split up there. So I went through that whole, all this stats we talk about people going through. I went through all of that in the space of like 3 months. I was moving back in with my family because you haven't got a job anymore. That with those wages, you can't chase your dream. You haven't got your partner anymore. And the other thing I always bring up is in other jobs, if you lose a job and you're an accountant, you've still got the accountancy skills. You can go get that job and do it elsewhere. For footballers, when you get told that's it and you retire, I can never use that skill set again. This
is my next question. Like, identity is gone instantly. Like that. Like, you are then just Chris.
Yeah.
Like, as harsh as it sounds, everybody sees you as the footballer. You are now back at home a nobody in a lot of people's eyes.
Absolutely.
How hard was it and how soon after did you sort of get that back and realise, you know what? No, I'm not the footballer. That was just a career.
Yeah.
I'm still the same person who's going to go on and be successful with something else.
Yeah, I think I've never struggled with sort of ego issue. I can imagine it's harder for some people more than others.
Yeah.
But it's certainly humbling, to come down and think, no, this really is it. There isn't something. Before it was always, I think it's coming. Now that is it. It's over. It's not coming back. So that was an experience. But I think from my side of things, the amount of negatives I had in my career, and we could talk for hours of all the experiences of it, it does make you resilient. So I was my mindset has almost been, nothing will ever beat me. And I'm not saying I'll be the best at anything, but I won't let other people make me feel bad. And I've had times in my career when I felt really small, by other people. And I look back and I just think I was just too young at the time to deal with it. And it took some of those learnings to be like, actually, now I can handle this. And it was shit. It was some big negatives with it, and it was hard and it was stressful, but I grounded out and you get your head down, you get passionate about something else. And the good thing for players, I think, is it's almost a bit military. Like, for our whole lives, we've been driving towards a goal of being the best player you can be, your own dreams. So when you retire, you're not a different person. You just can't chase that dream anymore.
Just that dream.
Just that
There's
dream.
Other dreams. You've got to find
but I think foot players can be amazing employees or anything else because you're military, your discipline. Your discipline is 10 out of 10 to be a top player. To be that 0.1%, you have to be, because you're competing against so many other people. So you just have to move the goalposts. And then suddenly you've got a new lease of life because you can work towards something else.
Your transferable skills are top of the tree, aren't they? Yeah. Really. I always bang on about this. I think resilience is a huge one, which from such an early age, you've been chasing this impossible dream and you've reached it. And now what you have to do is change that mentality to go and reach another impossible dream in a different career. And we're already inbuilt within ourselves to have all them character traits to go on and do that.
For sure.
So I think we're in them negatives that we all face, I think are huge positives moving forward with life.
We can do it, boys.
Absolutely, yeah. So you've got to give as much positive as you can. As I mentioned, it's almost like you have a 50-year career just squeezed into 10 years, as stressful as you can, because there's no way these football environments are allowed in any other work environment. No. The stuff I've seen and experienced is crazy. But I'm quite happy that I'm quite grateful that I've experienced that. I think
I'm the same.
made me a lot of a better person. There's friends I know will never have the experience I've had in that, and now I think I could take on anything really. And I've had some real bad times and negatives, but you just get on with it. And I think the big thing we spoke about then with, you know, creating space and time is the hard bit is just getting the next thing to be passionate about, because I think that's where a lot of players struggle, is finding what they really want to do next, because they've only ever loved football. And then it's like, well, what do I actually like outside? And I think a fair point to say is you won't actually know until you try a few things, to be honest. For most people, how would you possibly know you're really going to enjoy building a business or having this, you know, might be a financial advisor, might be an accountant, you might be X, Y, and Z salesman. But until you try a few things, you don't have to know the exact answer, is the honest truth. Because once you're playing, while you're playing, you don't have the time to put in hundreds of hours into something. So you just got to go out and try it. It's just got to...
My man says this all the time, don't you?
Exactly that. Like, I feel like we don't have the time to go out and try it, but we have a lot more time than anyone else to give something a go.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much out there for people to give a go, and not just find a job, but find a career, find something like you now that you are passionate about, because football is a passion. It isn't just as much as it is a job, it's a job that we are very passionate about from an early age. I think athletes have to go into a new career that they're equally as passionate about. Otherwise, that's where all the shit comes along, where people like are depressed, people go bankrupt, people split up with their partners because they just can't deal with all the shit that comes along with leaving that passionate career.
Yeah, for sure.
On that, and with the stats and all that, when you said before using a long-term relationship, do you think that played part in when you retired, had an effect on the relationship and when you split
for
up?
sure. I mean, for my instance was more, well, I lived away a lot from all my career. So then one of my big things, just not everyone's the same, but I sort of said to my partner, is trying to be as a good person was almost, don't come and travel around with me. I'm not going to drag you to follow my life, you know, because I was moving around the country playing for different football league clubs. I said, no, you have your own life and do it that way. And in the end, when actually I had more time, you realize you're different people by then. You know, when you actually spend all day, every day with them, then when was that? 27, 28. So we were together for 10 years. But that's in your 20s and late 20s. You change dramatically as a person as you start to have enough money to be your own person. So it's kind of like, it was shit. It was bad, but another thing I went through, I think the stats it's something crazy where a third of players get divorced in the first 12 months, a third, and it goes up to 75% in the first 3 years. And a lot of that is financial, for sure, because not saying, you know, that the typical reasons you're thinking, but it's just, you are used to certain lifestyles and what that brings, and and when you don't have financial security, what that turns you into. So when you don't have money, what that turns you're not the best person.
We'll see the real person then.
You know,
we'll
and
see
that's when you've got anxiety, you're stressed, you're negative, or some people have other things where they might be short-tempered and angry or whatever. That's the other side we don't really talk about, but that's why a lot of these things happen, because you're not the same person. Because it takes, when you retire, often the first year you can sort of get by year 2, 3, 4, 5, reality's really setting in by that point, and that's when these sorts of things start to happen.
So when you were still playing, did you study anything else? You said you had your couple of properties and you were looking like, to me, you were heading that way.
Yeah.
But did you explore other options? Did you think, oh, I'll go into coaching, I'll do this, this and this?
Yeah, well, I was doing a lot of stuff on the property front, and I was building a modest portfolio because I was League One wages, you know, so I was doing what I could, and I was saving, I was quite frugal, but I was doing my best. But then I did a little bit on financial planning stuff. So in my head, I was thinking, well, I'm quite interested in this. I think it gives you some good basic sort of essentials, really. If I can look after money, then that's probably a good thing to have for the rest of your life, to have that idea. So I did a little bit on that, but then I mean, as for other things, really, when I retired, I went into this business that I created, and that's where I've spent all my time, really. So I haven't had to go down some of those other routes, but I would have if I needed to. It was just this business then has grown into something else, so all the time and passions into that. But yeah, for players, as you mentioned, you've got enough time to study these things. It's just, you've got to try some bits, haven't you? And the coaching side, I started doing a B license, but I think the coaching, for me, you just got to love football so much. And I think it works best personally if for players who've had really big careers where they've already got the investment stuff elsewhere. So the footy becomes a passion.
Yeah.
Because coaching is really hard. Just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're a good coach.
No.
And you have to start at the bottom of the tree. The average wage of a coach, I think, is like 27 grand a year. So if you're used to 200, 400, 600, £1 million a year wages, you come down to earth pretty quickly. And you do 3 times the amount of hours, and the traveling and stuff, and you're starting back with the kiddies and stuff like that. So it's a humbling, experience. But if you love footy, it's great. I think it's almost got to be blended in with something else. That's my opinion on the coaching.
No, I agree.
side.
And luckily for you, you found something that you was passionate about. So talk us through this business then.
Well, when I retired, one of the things I sort of mentioned, I've spoken a little bit about my experience of how I went through that case study of being that footballer, had to retire early, go through the relationship breakup, finances, then all the stuff, the negatives that you hear. And I remember nobody helped me in all this scenario. I did everything off my own back. And I remember the one call I had from the PFA for help, it literally went like this. Somebody called me up and said, "Hi, is this Chris Ribeiro?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, just heard you retired. How are you feeling? You all right in your head?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm all right." He's like, "Okay, cheers." It was as quick as 30 seconds, and that was the last I heard of it.
Do you know what, you've touched on it there, and I'll let you carry on, but my question was going to be, how's the support during the transition process, but from anyone?
Now, I'm not saying you can't burden, I'm not blaming the PFA tour. They can't look after every single player that retires and all this stuff to a degree. But I think there can always be more. I'm obviously biased being a player that's retired, and I didn't get anything. And I said I didn't get the insurance back, so I had literally nothing. It was literally, that's it. So, when the only thing they have paid towards, I had another, not surgery as such, towards an operation sort of thing. So, but I think everyone gets, I think it's about 10, 15,000, something like that you have as a pot. Yeah. So that's good. But as for the support size, there should always be more. And I know it's a difficult one because you've got thousands of players and how far do you go with it? But my experience can only be, I was fortunate that I did it off. I had good family, good friends. I got through the negatives and I moved the goalpost to chase something else that was productive and could help other people. But that was because of how I was treated. So I was like, well, I don't want players to go through what I went through. I'll do it for my friends. And that's how it started, where I thought, well, I really love the property side of things. I know it's given me space and time and freedom, because the first properties I had, they'd gone up by over 100 grand, and I had these other ones there with income. So I had pots of money alongside my savings. Like, oh, I've got a bit of time here. It's given me like the space to actually decide what I wanted to do. Otherwise, just have to go and get the first job I could just to pay for my car, pay for this, pay for X, Y, and Z. So it worked for me and it made me some good money. I was like, well, why can't I do this for my friends? So I started with this idea, and I actually met my business partner when we were on a course elsewhere, on a property course, and he was the other end of the scale, where he was 10 years older. He had a multimillionaire from other businesses in the tech, and then he had a property portfolio, then he had a letting agency. So he had all the systems side of things, and I had more the passion, drive, and contacts. It's like, well, I think there could be something here. And my mission was, I want to help as many, or my friends, not go through what I went through, really. And it just started with 3 or 4 friends doing it that way, based up in Greater Manchester. And then 4 or 5 years later now, we've scaled it into bigger and bigger, and hopefully, we can help a lot more people. But that's where my passion, we talk about where you've directed your efforts and your discipline. It's been there for the last 5 years. That company and business we built is that service. That's my baby now. So that's it's good and bad thing, but that's what footballers are like, aren't they? You get sort of solely focused on the one thing.
Do you think that stems from your lack of support, you wanting to now support players in a different way, because you're trying to do it obviously financially through property, but with the sole aim looking towards retirement? As you said before, that will ease any burden on any player who might be in the same situation as you. So do you think that support, that comes from your lack of support? Yeah,
for sure. It's because things like property, I think it's a fantastic vehicle, but it needs a team to do it. And we talked earlier, but you need to start early enough as well. These things, the earlier you start, the easier it is to have something really powerful at the end. And I think, unfortunately, the way it goes, people don't start thinking of it until they're 28, 30, 32, and you've just missed out on so much opportunity to help yourself. And you've got this small, opportunity, this window of earnings you've got, which might be 10 years, 12 years, 14 years, whatever. You've got to maximize it, because where in the real world can you earn 10 grand a week? Do you realize how few people in the world earn 10 grand a week? It's unbelievable wages, and how many years it would take you to get to that stage, and the time and stress of the people in those jobs, the responsibility they take on. So it's like, you don't realize how blessed you are to be in that position. You just got to maximize it as best you can. So the fact no one helped me do it, so there are guys that we work with, a Premiership, Championship, and some guys are League One, League Two, and we do everything for them. So it's literally as hands-free as it could be, but it's personal as well, because there's only so many people you can look after, and hopefully as we grow and the business grows, we can bring more people on so we can help more and more players. But it's creating a system whereby they can do it as they're playing, they barely lift a finger, and they can just keep acquiring, buying assets in good areas, strong fundamentals, having the whole team to manage it, source it for them, renovate, all this stuff that we do. But then when they retire, they can have rental incomes from these large portfolios, but also pots of equity that we've had from guys like the ones we bought 4 or 5 years ago, and they're already worth 80k more, and 100k more, 60k more. They've only owned them 3 or 4 years. Wait till they're now sort of 26, 27. When they're 35, why can't these pots be 120, 140, 160k? But they've got 5 of them, 10 of them, 20 of them, 30 of them. That's what's you can create, but you have to start early enough, and you have to be consistent. And I think that's where most players fall down, is they might do one, then they sort of goes off their mind, they focus on this, they focus on that, and before they know it, they're 28, 29, they've missed years of it. It's the consistency that's a really hard thing to put together.
So how to get the lads to do this with you? What do you do? Do the lads pay you to source a house, or how does it work?
Yeah, so when we started, it was just for guys I played with, or friends of friends, small group, and then it scaled into more. But essentially our service is like end to end. So we help someone, if they're coming on first time, they might need to do things like create a limited company. We've got the accountants, we've got solicitors, we've got brokers, all that financial side of things. That's a setup. We do all that. And our PA, Claire, was brilliant. So it almost becomes a PA for the players. It does all the admin stuff. So they basically sign documents, pay invoices. It couldn't be as easy as I mean, the amount of times I've had to almost, show them exactly where to sign on stuff, how to do this, and I've spent time with people because these guys have never been through purchasing properties before, never gone through the educational system. Everything's new, so you have to hold a hand through absolutely everything. And then once they've done 2, 3, 4, it gets easier. But the whole system is designed to be that way. So then we'll learn find properties. So we're based in Greater Manchester, and the reason that is because, as you guys know from being up north, as you go into, you're trying to find in the property world areas of great fundamentals, because the real money in property is in capital gains. That's the truth. But you need to be in an area where the entry level is low enough that you can acquire enough. So if you're based in London, well, how many houses in London can you really buy over a career? It's pretty hard to do it. So you want to try and find a balance of both. And for where we've gone through our data, is Greater Manchester, in my opinion, is the best. But there's some other good areas. But that's because it's had phenomenal investment into the area. So we invest now, and we just buy assets in great areas of great fundamentals. Some of them where we add value through renovations, some of them that we get through discounts because of the volume that we do and the relationships we built up. But we do all that for the player. And then we've got the letting agency at the back end. So that's totally managed for them. So these players never see some of these properties. They get updates from us, but they never, ever have to attend these properties ever. But every 3 months, every 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, they just another one. And then they look back and like, oh, I've got 5, I've got 7, I've got 8. And they're doing this for 5 years, 10 years, 12 years. And that can create something really powerful, over the long term. It's just implementing it, isn't it?
Do you think these guys that are coming to you, do you get more younger lads or more senior lads who are worrying? Yeah. I'm thinking, shit, I now need to look at my pension pot, because the aim of obviously this conversation and many conversations that we have is trying to get them messages to lads who we've missed the boat. Like, I'm listening to you there thinking, I needed to listen to you 10 years ago when I didn't have 2 kids and a wife, and I had a lot more free time, a lot more disposable income to really set something up. Whereas now it's sort of me trying to claw back that lost time. So your message to younger lads is, look, get involved now. But I'm interested to know what's your percentage in terms of the age of the lads?
I'd say you're quite right. I think often from between, we've got a few guys who are sort of 25 and under, but mainly 25 to 30, I think, is when they're starting to think, actually, I need to start thinking about this, because I can see I'm coming to 28, 29, I'm coming towards the time I need to think about it. And then occasionally we get the guys in the sort of early 30s that want to do something. But yeah, it's the earlier you start, the better. But I think it's also about expectations. So there's no problem buying a property today for you, because it's still a long-term plan. If you still got, property is a long-term game at the end of the day. If you're in it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you just got to think, well, yeah, you're not going to be a millionaire next year by doing this, but in 10 years' time, I guarantee you're going to be in a really good place. If you follow these solid rules and manage it well and buy in areas of great fundamentals, just the nature of inflation, the nature of money printing, if you use your money wisely, use leverage wisely, you could be in an amazing position. If you look at We talked about the gains in Manchester in the last 20 years, but the UK on average been 5% a year growth the last 20 years. Manchester's been 7% a year. So just by being in the market in that time, he'd have done phenomenally well. And if you look at my business partner's portfolio, which he owns 40 odd units himself from 2009 or so, and because he bought in areas that were better than that, he beat that. Some of his like 12% a year on average, which is, when I say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, but the data's there. But that portfolio, by owning it for 10 years, he bought it all 3 million quid with £1.5 million of lending like where. Now that same portfolio is 6 million quid. That's all equity of his. That's all towards his retirement stuff. Now that's a big case study we're talking about, but that's possible. And all it is just built up of these small little building blocks because he did it, and he did it his way. These players can build something like that. It's just that property isn't a click of a button, it's done. It's a lot of work. It's slow, it's hassle. It's something that people use every day. It's stressful. But if you can do it and you can get someone to do it for you, and it's more realistic for players, then it can be amazing over the long term. It's just implementing it, as I keep coming back to, doing it every 3, 6, 9, 12 months, whatever's realistic. But it can take you somewhere so powerful, over 5, 10, 15 years for sure.
I think it's hard to change the mentality of like the young lads that talking about myself when I was younger, like investing money. You don't think about when you're 18, 19, what this is going to give you when you're 30, 35, 40. You want a quick return, which nothing that gives you a quick return is sustainable. So the only advice I can give for the young lads who are listening is, if you have got spare money, to invest it now, because it will help you in the long term. But it's hard to change that mentality because you're not thinking that. You're not thinking when you're 18 you're going to have an injury like you did at 18. You're going to be thinking that we're going to be playing at the top level.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't think
you're spot on. We talk about it takes that shock normally to feel it. But you just got to try and spread, spread good theory behind it. You're trying to back it with truth. I'm trying to say to these players, this is what I believe in. My money's our business. That one of the big things I talk about is, practicing what you preach. In our business, I think one of our milestones is, I didn't realize this until I went through our data, but I think our next purchase takes us to £10 million worth of property that we've done. And of that, though, we've done 3.5 million quid's worth of property, and players have done sort of 6.5. So we're in it, doing it as well. And that's a big thing I have a question mark about a lot of people, is they make more money in talking about things rather than doing it. And I wanted to be the opposite of saying, no, we're in the trenches with you. We use the same brokers, solicitors, contractors, buying the same areas. We have the same troubles that you do, but we find solutions and all this stuff so I'm in it with them. So I feel very comfortable saying to go, look, trust me, because I've got one, or we've got one on the street behind, or we bought and sold one over here. We bought this agent. So there's total and utter confidence in this system and what it does, and all the data behind it to prove it. The hard bit is getting into someone's head that starting, like I said, early enough. But even if you're later and you're 28, 29, start.
Yeah.
It's never too late. At the end of the day, it's never too late. Okay, you might miss the optimal point. But we all would have been buying in 20 years ago if we could have. But forget that. Come back to today. Start making decisions now. And if you have pots sat around and you're just getting eaten away by inflation and all this other stuff, you've got to start placing it somewhere and or at least start looking at what works for you. Maybe it's not property's the right thing for you, but there's things out there that are a hell of a lot better than leaving it in your bank account right now, that's for sure.
Do you know why I love this, and all the guests that we get on, is the fact that it's relatable to anyone listening. We could have any property guru, multi-portfolio property guys sat here that people could be listening to, like, he's talking nonsense, like, I can't do that. Whereas you were in the shoes of a lot of our listeners who they'll be listening to you and thinking, played in the Championship, played the majority of his career in the Football League. Why can't I go and do that? Yeah. Why can't I get in the property ladder, start a business, invest in X, Y, and Z, and go and build a successful business? And I think that is so important to footballers, to listen to people who are relatable and think, I can do that. He's done it. Why not me? And that's why I love listening to these stories. Of people who are in the same shoes as guys like us.
No, definitely. I was so excited to get you on. I watched you on Homes Under the Hammer. So.
Did you? That was a while ago now, yeah.
That was made up.
Yeah, well, there's a world of opportunity, and this is just one aspect. There's guys out there with all sorts of different businesses, but I would also caveat that you don't have to be a business owner to be successful or something. Self-employed, I'll be honest, I spend more hours than I would being employed. I spend all day working this, but because it's my passion and I love it, and it is my baby, I don't mind doing it. I'm not saying that a 9 to 5 is not the right thing to do, but I think for the footy guys, you can give yourself that opportunity to decide if you've got that buffer. And it's either, yes, you can have a savings pot, but that's not really the most efficient way to, create something. Ideally, like the way I did it on a small scale, was having assets that give you time and freedom to think, where's my next step going to be? And it might be starting a business. It might be that you retrain yourself in something else. Or it might be that you want to take a year's sabbatical to be with your family, whatever, before you think. But you need something to give you that, what's going to pay your bills at that point. Because when you're 30, 32, 35, whatever, you're going to have bills at that point. Have you budgeted towards that? These are the reasons we do what we do now. We try and almost create a plan for every player and say, what's your outgoings now? How are you going to cover that? So it might be, after tax, might be 100K a year, 200K a year. Well, this is how many you're going to need, as an example, to get to that point. So here's your plan. If you've got 8 more years of playing, you're going to need 3 years to do that. And after 8 years, you can come back and you might sell one, you might remortgage one, but you've also got income here. You can then build up this top up of your wage. You might have 10 years of wages from what you built up 10 years previous. Then bolt on a job that you're going to do or another business. That's an amazing transition into the real world. But to do that, you have to start early enough to build those building blocks, And so it can be done. It's just, like I come back to it, starting it and having that conscious thought.
Well, just a quick one. We always try and encourage lads to have a dual career, but as long as it doesn't affect the performance on the pitch, and that's like managing your time, stuff like that. But you're basically helping the players out by taking all their time, just leaving them to focus on the football pitch, and you're doing everything for them, which is very good. It helps that dual career.
Well, basically. I think it depends, because lots of our guys naturally are sort of Premiership and Championship. So there's a trade-off almost. When you're at the top levels and monies, it's actually not worth their time to not focus solely on footy, because the honest truth is, in foot, that you will never make more money than you do in football. So you're better off being the best player you can be and have the best career. And every time you get pots of money, is offload it into your things like that. As you start getting to more like League One, League Two conference, and it's actually, you're on good wages. You are great wages for 20-odd-year-olds, but it's normal wages for the world. Then it's like, well, now you need to start thinking about your transition. And as you said, the dual career stuff starts coming into it. So we kind of have a mixed bag where the guys who are in the Premiership, it's not worth them trying to learn something or spend time. Their thing is, I need to be pristine for the next day, because every game I play, I'm worth 50K a week. I've got to be 100% every single day. So they can do that. But then they've got enough money to have somebody like us or other people around that every time they get 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, it's placed elsewhere. Whereas when you're playing more in the lower leagues, you have to, honest truth, you have to work harder. I'm sorry, but it is just the truth. I had to do it. Everyone's going to have to do it. That you're going to have to learn another skill set, and whether that's, as I said, another job, another qualification, whatever, or a business, starting something. But you've got to go out and just do it. There's so many failures I've had, and in business, so many mistakes I've made. You won't be perfect at anything, and the first thing you do will definitely not be the best thing you ever do. So it's like, you just got to go out there and start. And as you said, as long as it doesn't affect your footy side of things, you can get passionate about other stuff, work on it in the background, and quietly see if you can build stuff up. At the very worst, you're going to have some momentum. So when you do retire, it's like, oh, well, I have tried that. I didn't enjoy that thing. I'm going to go over here. Or I did that and I didn't like the people, so I'll do the same thing, but I'm going to do it over here. At least you're already moving with it, rather than that first summer when you've got no club. It's, well, where do I go from here?
Start from scratch.
That's tough.
What was the number one the hardest part of the transition for you?
Hardest part, I think, the loss of identity, in a sense of the reality hitting in, was tough. It wasn't an ego thing, but just waking up every day and not having to train. I think the loss of a passion and a goal, that's huge, because I found having the 6 months of wages in my particular case was great, but do you know what? Without purpose, pointless.
Doesn't mean anything. I
actually hated it. I had about a month where it was like, oh, it's like being off on the summer. It's, oh, everyone else working, I'm off. This is quite good. And then it gets to week 5 and you're not really doing much. Week 6, you're not doing much. And it's like, well, I know I've got wages at the end of the month, but I hate this. This is
mentally
awful.
I'm fucked,
Purpose is everything. And it made me really think, even if I played to the top level and I was with multi-millions, if you've got no purpose, what is the point? And I think that was a real, and I learned at sort of 28, it's like, I don't want a life on the beach, sat doing nothing. To me, that's a reward. And it sounds, maybe that a lot of people would disagree with me, but when you don't have purpose, something to drive towards, I think this is from being a player, and you guys have the same, you go mental. I've got to have something. I was like, where's my sense of achievement? And that's what gets me every day. Every day in the morning, I go to the gym at like 6:30. So it's like, even if I have the worst day possible, everything goes wrong, I did a little physical thing that was good for me. And I ticked that little box, and that's ingrained from footy.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't just sit around and do nothing every day. That's against how I've grown up and how I've built. So I come back to those skill sets of why players can be such brilliant employees and business owners, because how many people really have that sort of discipline? It's already ingrained in us.
Just drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Drive. Purpose is the best word. Like, just purpose to what you do.
For sure.
In the past and obviously moving forward.
Yeah.
No, we really appreciated you coming on. We're going to end with a couple of questions.
Okay.
We'll start off with the first one. What was your biggest high in football?
Biggest high, I think, playing for Wales. So I played once in the friendly. So I had 2 caps for Wales. Although one was a European qualifier, I came on as well. I gave away a penalty, so just cut that one. I don't think about it ever, honestly. But that was probably my high. Because I don't look back on my career with fondness, really, because I'd never achieve what I wanted to. But I did play for Wales, and that was like my big thing was, could I get an international cap? So I did that at 20 years old, and that was like, that's a big thing for me.
It's a huge thing. Like, from having your knee injury so early on to go on and achieve that, and say you don't look back at your career with any great fondness. Yeah. To still have that memory, like, is amazing, really. Yeah,
well, that era, the beauty of that era was, it was the golden era. So, Bale was a year older than me, Rams a year younger. You had Joe Allen's, Neil Ted, all that era was the guys I was playing with. And I was one of the guys that didn't maintain that level. You know, I fell away, and there was a handful of us that fell away, and then a strong lot of them went and played Premiership, and they were the best ever Wales squad. And I remember at the time saying, this team's going to qualify for something. Like, we'll never qualified for for a long time. I remember being there thinking, this team is going to be that era that qualified. Yeah. And in the end, they got to semi-final of the Euros when they were at the peak, and I was in that group. I just couldn't maintain.
Sorry to this, I'm not carrying this on, but is that harder to take? Because it's not because of your ability, it's because of the injuries is actually I've stopped that. Is that harder to take?
The honest truth is, I'm still bitter about it all to a degree. Like, I'll never get over it. I know it's not the nicest thing to say, but I'll never get over it, because I'll always be thinking, what if? What if? Because those guys that I might play ahead of or play with, they were top Premiership players or top Championship, but they had great careers, and they deservedly so. They did amazing. And I never had that opportunity to do the same. And whilst, I could blame myself for certain things, but I never had the same platform because my body was not the same to do that, unfortunately. And there's loads of people like me, and there'll be people that have had worse stuff, but I'll never stop thinking about it. That is just a scar that you carry as players.
I'm one. If my mum and dad were taller and I was 6 foot, I might have played in the Premiership.
Everyone, we've all got something. And if I was a couple of inches taller, it might be good to play more centre half, but yeah.
Right, and then lastly, your message to current players, ex-players regarding transition and coming out of the game.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about the earlier you start, the better. But I think it's just making a conscious. I think people just got to understand that football will retire you, and I think that when you actually say it like that, I think that's really quite powerful to say it, because when I was younger and people used to talk to me about retirement makes me think of 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds, and people think retirement, it'll come around. But no, it's inevitable that you will stop. There's nothing else. And you will stop being a young man. When you finish, you are still a young man in the real world, and you're 30, 32, 34. So that's somehow, you've got to get that reality to settle in. So from there, it's just, nothing comes for free. You've got to put some time and effort in, and whether that's going out to find someone like a financial advisor, like the service that we do, something similar where you don't put the time and effort, you put the time and effort to find the team, and then you trust them to deliver it for you, or you put the time and effort in to do it yourself and you create your own business, whatever. But you have to take it on board that this shit is real. It is real, and I think we talk about it takes until a shock happens for it to settle in, but I think it's really hard to train people and a sad note is, I think it is really hard to teach young 20s, early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s that this shit ends. This shit does end. And when you're 35, no one will care. And I remember when I was retiring, I had the manager who was nice to me and everything. He got me in front of this team before it was a Friday game, but I'd known I retired. No one else knew. I gave him a speech and he's like, thanks for your time. Right, on to Plymouth away. And
no one cares.
That's football. You have your small minute in the limelight, looking after. Thanks for that, but on to next. And that's the end of it. And so, as sad as that is, and that is the reality. You just got to accept that and go, well, I'm going to get the best out of it I can. And you've got to look after yourself. You still be a good person with it, but you've just got to you've got to put your passion into something else alongside, as you mentioned, whether it's your business stuff, whether it's into somebody else. But you have to. You don't have another choice, is the honest truth. Yeah. So the earlier you do it, the better.
All right, Chris, thank you very much, mate.
No
yeah,
problem,
on that note, top man. Thanks, mate. Loved
thanks
it.
for having me.
Cheers, Chris.